name is Dana Buckmere, and I'm the author of Everything Will Be Okay, which is a memoir about surviving a domestic violence relationship. In the beginning, he was great. We met on Facebook. It seemed like we were a perfect match. We had a lot of things in common, and he was really fun and charismatic. He liked to go out and do things, and it was the summer. It was also during COVID, so, everyone was really restless from being stuck and isolated alone. I was contacted by his ex-girlfriend early on, and she contacted me to warn me about, and she, expressed that he was abusive, and she shared some things with me, but had already warned me about her. So he pretty much framed the narrative by saying, she's an alcoholic, she's obsessed with me, if you ever hear from her, don't talk to her. But of course I was curious, so I heard her out. But even when we were on the phone that day, she sounded a little drunk, so it kind of aligned with what he had warned me about. So I didn't believe her, which later came to realize that, she was right and that she was just trying to warn me. And typically that's the MO of the abuser. It's like a whirlwind romance, and he was very impulsive, and the pace of the relationship was very intense, very fast. He said, I love you, early on. He said he wanted to marry me. He wanted to have a family. I was his soulmate. He did something that's called love bombing, where he just praised me and said how wonderful I was, how beautiful I was, and how lucky he was to be with me, put me up on a pedestal. He'd isolate me from other people and say it was him and I against the world type of thing. And then I was more vulnerable to him. So there were red flags in the beginning. I would say the red flags were, like I said, the pacing of the relationship, the intensity, the fact that he proclaimed his love for me and he didn't even know me. It was very new. And then he was drinking a lot. There was a lot of substance abuse. He became what seemed very spontaneous and alluring in the beginning, became kind of reckless and dangerous. His behavior was very erratic. And he also came into my space very quickly, was over my house all the time. Or one of the windows in the bathroom had to be replaced because he locked me out of the house, and I had to break through the window to get in. And instead of just replacing the window, he ended up gutting the entire bathroom, but without my knowledge. He did it at night and locked the door and said, oh, Dana, I'm going to surprise you. And finally, after weeks, when I got into the bathroom, I saw it was just an empty shell of a bathroom. There was nothing in it. So he just did these things. And I think part of it was if he encroached on my space, and if I needed him to be there to repair the bathroom, then, I wouldn't get rid of him. I feel like he had a lot of insecurities and abandonment issues, and he just wanted to cling on to somebody. It didn't really matter who it was. I never experienced this before. So, of course, I'd always heard about domestic violence, but I'd never experienced it firsthand. So this experience was very humbling to me because I realized that it could happen to anybody. I was always one of those people that said, oh no, that won't happen to me. I'm too smart for that, or I'm too strong for that, or I'm too independent. But being in the shoes, as so many other women have experienced, you realize that it could happen to anyone regardless of age, education, socioeconomic status, upbringing. It's unfortunately, it's a problem in our society that, branches out to all walks of life. So the first time he hit me, we were supposed to go on a boat ride. And a friend that I had from high school came along. I promised her a beautiful day out on the water, and it turned into a nightmare. His friend had a boat, and so I had never met this friend before. The four of us went out on the water, and like anything, it started off really fun. And then he started drinking, and I don't know if he was doing drugs, but he started criticizing me in front of the other people on the boat, saying that I was fat and making derogatory comments. And I just went up to him and I was like, calm down. And I put my hand on his face, like, just to like, so he could look at me in the eye and like to steady him and calm him down. And the next thing I know, I'm on the floor of the boat. So he was a big guy. He was double my size. And he hit me with such force that I fell at the bottom of the boat and just saw black. And when I came to, my girlfriend, she was on top of me, trying to shield me from him because he was coming at me more and more and more. Like, he wouldn't stop. And he proceeded in taking not only my bag, my belongings, my phone, and throwing it into the water, but he took my friend's, her stuff as well, threw it into the water. So we're like scrambling. We tried to jump off the boat and get our things, but they had already sunk. We couldn't find them. So we had nothing. And then his friend did nothing. He didn't say anything. He didn't step in. He just acted very irritated. Like, oh man, like, I didn't sign up for this, you know? So, I mean, the only good thing he did was turn the boat around and go back into the marina. And then we went into the marina and we docked. All the time, my friend is still trying to shield me from, because he's still continuing to come at me and attack me. I was just hysterically crying and in shock because I was like, what just happened, you know? And she just kept like trying to soothe me and whisper in my ear, Dana, you know, everything will be okay. Just ignore him. Don't respond to him. Hang in there. Finally, we arrive at the dock, and she and I jumped off the boat and ran. And we just kept running and running towards the car and was running after us. And she and I were able to get in the car, like right before he got to the car. And he was trying to open the door. He was banging on the door, banging on the windshield, trying to get in, but we were able to drive away from him. Well, the crazy thing is that thought that if he called the police first, that he could once again frame the narrative and twist the story. So in his warped mind, he wanted to tell the police that I attacked him. And he thought that they would believe him. The police were on their way there. So they came to my house and they interviewed me. And luckily, his friend sided with us and said, no, she didn't do anything. He attacked her. So he was arrested. And I kept saying to the police officer, he's not going to be arrested, right? He's not going to be arrested. I don't want to press charges. And now, in my position, I think, why would I not want to press charges? But I just think that he had such a grip on me in such a short period of time that it really influenced my way of thinking. And I just felt that I was so vulnerable to him, and he was able to control me in so many ways that I hadn't been controlled before. I felt bad for him instead of me, and I'm the one who got attacked. So the police advised that I shouldn't stay at my house that day, and so I went to stay at my friend's house. And that night was really rough for me emotionally. The next day, I couldn't hear out of my ear from when he hit me. So my friend advised me to go to the ER. So I went to the ER to get checked out, and 3 women that worked there shared their stories about domestic violence with me. And they were like, you know, he's not going to change. Make sure you don't go back to him. And they all shared their own personal stories. And that's when I started realizing, wow, so many people, you know, experience this. He only spent 1 night in jail. So he got out. And then about a week went by and he contacted me. Now, there was a protective order. He wasn't supposed to contact me, but he did. And I just think that I was, again, so vulnerable and feeling so broken that I told him that I would hear him out. So he met me and he cried and he apologized. And he said that the alcohol that mixed with his medication made him act that way. He's never done that before and he would never do it again. And he doesn't want to lose me and the whole thing. So I took him back. He never hit me again, but the emotional abuse, the psychological abuse was horrible. Especially he would do things like interrupt my sleep, wake me up in the middle of the night, and everything was an argument. Whether he was like going through my social media, he wanted to question me about a post. Why did someone put a heart on my post instead of a thumbs up? You know, he was just so consumed with jealousy and rage. Every single thing was an interrogation. Every single interaction with him was an attack. It went on like that for a while. And then finally, in December, the end began with an email where it was from an anonymous account, and it said ex-girlfriend. So of course I opened up the email and I read it, and it had like a whole laundry list of charges that he had against other women that were in the courts that I didn't know about, and a whole story about abuse and everything. And she went into details, and she said that she was warning me about it. So now this is the second warning that I've had about him, and I've already experienced it myself. So I confronted him about the email. He just raged out, saying that she was a liar and everybody's against him, and she's just jealous of our relationship and our love. You know, just very warped response. And then we got into an argument. He took my computer and he threw it on the ground, and it shattered into pieces, and I asked him to leave, and he refused to leave. I got up, and he got up like really close to my face, and he was like, Dana, this is not going to end well for you. And I just saw something so scary in his eyes. Like there was no feeling. His eyes were so dark and blank, and I just knew like I had to do something. So I took my dog, and I just took my purse, and I ran out of the house. And he's like, I could hear him like banging and screaming and yelling and going up and down the stairs and pacing. And it was really scary. His behavior was just really unpredictable. So I ran out into the car, and I drove down the street, and I called 911. And I said, you know, my boyfriend is having an episode, and, you know, he's being like very threatening with the way that he's acting and throwing things, and, you know, can you check it out? And they were like, oh, are there any weapons in the house? And I said, no. And 2 officers arrived on the scene, and as soon as they approached the house, a piece of furniture went flying through the window. And at first, the officer thought that they were gunshots. But then when they realized that you know, it wasn't, they're like, okay, so they retreated back. So basically what happened was ended up having a 4-hour standoff with the police department, which started with the 2 police officers. It became like the whole police force. They had a SWAT team. I was in the parking lot down the street waiting with a police officer while he just had a 4-hour rampage in my house. He threatened to kill himself in my house. He broke every single window. He just broke everything with a hammer. It was just like completely destroyed. And after the 4 hours, he finally surrendered. Well, finally, when the standoff ended, it was like 3:00 in the morning, and it's December 1st in Connecticut, so it's freezing. And the police officers are like congratulating that they got him and that nobody was hurt. And I'm sitting in my backyard with no doors on my house, no windows. They had to cut the gas because threatened to burn the house down. So they're like, okay, here's a piece of paper. Call the number tomorrow. Good luck. Bye. And I'm like, what do I do now? You know, like I couldn't call anybody at 3:00 in the morning. So I just went inside the house with glass everywhere, you know, no heat, and just sat on the couch with my dog until like 7-8 o'clock in the morning until I could call someone to come help. And then within the next 5 to 6 months, I stayed in a hotel Well, because that's how long it took for them to repair the damages that he did on my house. So he didn't get arrested immediately, which I believe was totally calculated. I don't think that was ever going to hurt himself. I think he was just delaying being arrested. So while he was at the hospital on the psych hold, they gave him his cell phone. He pretty much tortured me for the next 24 hours, calling me incessantly, telling me he was going to kill me, come back and kill me, telling me he was going to slit my dog's throat in front of me and I'd have to watch him bleed out, saying that he was going to finish the job, all of these horrible things. I had to call the hospital and try to talk to someone in charge and say, like, listen, this person should not have access to a phone. Even after he destroyed everything, like, I felt like I was still trying to defend myself, and you know, he was just taking advantage of the situation. It was about 3 days later, he was finally arrested, and the detective that specialized in domestic violence cases, she met with me, and she started looking into his history, and she uncovered that he had a long list of violence against women going back for like 30 years, from where he grew up, where he went to college, a number of incidents in Connecticut, but yet he never did any like real jail time because he either like intimidated the witnesses or convinced, you know, the women in some way to drop the charges, or he came from an affluent family, so maybe they in some way influenced the victims. It was shocking, like how many incidents he had. And while I was living in the hotel, I just kind of poured myself into writing because I needed a project and I needed to keep sane in some way. So I feel like writing this story was therapeutic for me because I was able to like pour out all my emotions onto the paper and empty everything out, kind of purge in a way. So that was helpful. And then while I was doing it, I was a member of a writing group, a local writing group, and we would meet like every couple weeks, and I would read an excerpt of my writing and they would comment and critique it. So that kind of gave me a sense of community. I have a therapist that I talk about in the book, and I talk to her weekly, and she's amazing. Like I always say, I don't know if I would be able to get through this without you. You know, she was one of those people that was just so supportive and not judgmental, and she was a great listener. And she would say, like, call me anytime. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. You know, I'm here for you. And she's been wonderful. So the name of it, it's a memoir based on my experience in that relationship. It's called Everything Will Be Okay. And the reason that I entitled it Everything Will Be Okay is because when he would have an episode, he would always try to calm me down and make me feel better by telling me everything will be okay. And of course, in that situation, it wasn't. But then as I came to find out through myself, you know, becoming stronger and finding my own voice, I realized that everything will be okay. So it kind of has a double meaning. I feel like now it's pretty much a mission for me to share my story because, you know, and by helping other people, I feel like I help myself. Like I heal by helping other people. So it's, you know, a two-way street. And I've noticed that like it's really expanded to so many different groups of people. Like, you know, when I do a talk, women will come up to me and they'll share their story, you know, and I'm so grateful for people to share their stories, you know, for them to open up and be so sensitive. But it shows me how resilient people are, because I always think like, you know, you think about your situation and how tragic it is, but there's always somebody else that has gone through something worse than you know, so it reminds me to be grateful for what I do have and that I have the capability to write the book, share the story, and continue like spreading awareness. So now I'm 43 years old, and what I like about my life is that I've been able to use this book as a platform to spread awareness. I've partnered with the Domestic Violence Crisis Center in our area, and we'll do talks, you know, around the state. I also recently started to talk to high school groups. So a couple weeks ago, I spoke to seniors, like a group of senior girls that are about to graduate, and it was through the National Junior League. They wanted me to talk to them and share my story before they went off to college, which I think is really important because a lot of the times, like I said, I talk to survivors of domestic violence. But it's nice to be able to speak to someone, and do some work on the preventative. And I just got engaged on my birthday in November. So we're actually planning our wedding and we're getting married in August. And my dog that was with me the night and has been with me like the whole time, he's going to be the ring bearer. We got him a little bow tie and he's going to be wheeled down in a wagon. Well, as far as red flags, I feel like the anatomy of an abuser or a manipulator, I always use the analogy of an iceberg. Like there are things that you see up top and then there are things that are hidden. So the things that they reveal to you, and a lot of times they're very superficial, like confidence, charming, charismatic. Those things are usually the opposite of what they actually are. So they really lack a strong identity. They just kind of cling on to the person that they're with at that time and, take interest in what their hobbies are. And so that's why you get this false sense of compatibility. I think another red flag would be the pacing, the intensity of the relationship, saying like, you're my twin flame, you're my soulmate, you're the love of my life very early on. The love bombing is something to look out for because it's not real. Love is something that needs to grow over time, and you need to get to know the person and build trust in the relationship. I noticed, he had a lot to say about his past relationships. Like, oh, my ex, she's crazy. She's an alcoholic. She's obsessed with me. And usually, like when someone says those things and talks negatively about their exes, that should definitely be a red flag. So I always say that if you're a person that is a family or a friend that knows someone who's in an abusive relationship, you can't make them leave. But what you can do is let them know that you're there and that you love them unconditionally and that you will listen to them and you won't judge them. As far as a victim, I think that the mentality has to be that they're not responsible for the abuser, that they can't fix the abuser. It's supposed to be a partnership where, there's equality within and not someone always taking care of the other person, where I feel like the dynamic becomes where the victim feels guilty to leave, and sorry for the abuser, where they just have to be able to find something within themselves to remind themselves that they're strong and they're resilient and they can get through this. And I think oftentimes it's so hard to do that. And now that everything's kind of calmed down and become like balanced out, it's like my body is trying to get back to like a homeostasis, which takes time. And I said, like, when you're healing from trauma, it's not linear, and there really isn't like a time, like, oh, after a year, you'll be completely recovered. It's a process. One of the things I regret the most was not heeding the warning from the first ex-girlfriend that reached out to me. And I try to give myself some grace and be patient with myself because of that. But what I would advise women is to kind of pay attention and maybe try to take your heart out of the situation and consider things like that maybe a little bit more. I forgot to mention earlier when the detective started looking into, his history, and then I was writing the book, I actually received communication from 10 other women that had been through email, through social media, all sharing their horror stories with this man. So the one thing that I think I've learned is to build more of a community with women and believe other women, and almost like, support women more and look at it as like a sisterhood. And we have to realize that, we're in this together, and we're stronger together, and just support each other more and stop thinking that like women are out to get each other.